Professor Jacobson is Professor of Civil and Environmental Engineering at Stanford. He holds a BS in Civil Engineering, a BA in Economics, and an MS in Environmental Engineering from Stanford. Additionally, he holds an MS and a PhD in Atmospheric Science from UCLA. His career has focused on better understanding air pollution and global warming problems and developing large-scale clean, renewable energy solutions. He's developed and applied three-dimensional atmosphere, biosphere, and ocean computer models to simulate pollution, weather, climate, and renewable energy. And most famously, as many people probably already know, he has developed roadmaps to transition countries, states, cities, and towns to 100% clean, renewable energy. Additionally, he's created computer models to examine grid stability with high penetrations of renewable energy. In 2009, Professor Jacobson co-authored a plan featured on the cover of Scientific American magazine to power the world exclusively with wind, water, and sunlight, referred to as WWS. In 2010, he appeared in a TED debate, which is online, with Stuart Brand, which was rated as the 6th all-time science and technology TED Talk. I encourage you to take a look at that. In 2011, he founded the Solutions Project, along with actor and activist Mark Ruffalo. And the Solutions Project, if you're not familiar, is a nonprofit that combines science, business, and culture to educate the public about science-based, 100% clean energy roadmaps. In 2013, this research group developed individual wind, water, and solar energy plans for each of the 50 United States, and in 2017, for 139 countries around the world. The 50-state roadmaps, in fact, contributed here in California and also back east in New York to adopting 50% by 2030 renewable electricity laws, and with Hawaii adopting 100% renewable by 2045. Today, he has published 2 textbooks and over 150 peer-reviewed articles. And the coolest part of his resume is he made an appearance, you may or may not know, believe it or not, on a Late Show with David Letterman a few years back, where he discussed his clean energy plan, which happened to be watched by about 3 million people. So talk about leverage. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Professor Jacobson.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction and for having me come and talk to you. Well, I'm going to talk about our energy plans and potential for transitioning states, countries, and the world, and individual cities and towns to 100% clean renewable energy. And I'll start by motivation. What got me into this was I've always been interested since I was a teenager in trying to solve air pollution and climate problems. And so air pollution is one of the leading causes of death worldwide, with 4 to 7 million people who die prematurely each year. And this costs the world over $20 trillion per year based on statistical cost of life and illness. And in the U.S., it's about 65,000. In California, around 13,000 premature deaths per year. So this is a significant problem that occurs today, and we'd like to eliminate it. Global warming, of course, I don't have to convince you about either, and it's expected to cost $25 to $30 trillion per year by 2050. But fossil fuels are also limited resources, and even if you didn't care about climate, you didn't care about air pollution or the environment, you'd still care about the fact that the costs are going to go up with the limited resources that declines over time, and eventually that can lead to social, political, and economic instability. So these are all drastic problems that require immediate and drastic solutions. So our solution has been always to electrify or provide direct heat for everything, and in all sectors, all energy sectors, not just electricity, and provide that heat or electricity with clean renewable energy, namely wind, water, and solar power. So for example, in transportation, we transition everything to battery electric vehicles, or for long distances, hydrogen fuel cell, that's HFC, battery electric hybrids. And I'll show you examples of that. Heating, cooling, we use heat pumps for pretty much everything, which run on electricity. They don't create heat, they move heat, and they also move cold, which makes them much more efficient. Some solar hot water preheating. For industry, we use things like electric arc furnaces, dielectric heaters, induction furnaces. These are existing technologies. And then we provide the electricity with either wind, onshore, offshore wind, solar photovoltaics on rooftops or in power plants, concentrated solar power, geothermal power, existing hydroelectric. We're not proposing to build new dams, or tidal and wave power, or tidal and wave power. And so just to give you some examples, okay, now the hardest thing to transition will be aircraft, but there has been some progress so far. I mean, this on the left we have a battery electric aircraft, hydrogen fuel cell aircraft on the right here that goes 1,500 kilometers, seats 4 people. And the idea though is that all commercial aircraft will be up to 1,500 kilometers will be electric. And there are several companies like Ampere and others that are working on this right now. And for longer distance, it would be a hydrogen fuel cell electric hybrid. Now for hydrogen, you need bigger tanks because hydrogen is much less power density than, let's say, jet fuel, but it weighs a lot less. So you might have an aircraft that looks like this, which is a cryogenic hydrogen aircraft. But so it's larger fuselage, but it actually weighs less than the current aircraft. So the overall drag is the same, so the efficiency is pretty much the same. But the space shuttle was propelled into space on hydrogen, as are most rockets, have been most rockets over the last 30 years. So it's an existing technology, it just needs to be turned into commercial aircraft for long distances. So this is the hardest thing. We expect this by 2035 to 2040 to get this transition. So this is why, for example, we don't have 100% by 2030, because it will be really possible to get these aircraft and long-distance ships as well, all converted by then. But by 2035 to 40, we do hope so. For industrial heat, these are existing electric devices of arc furnaces, induction furnaces. So right now what you do is burn coal or fuel oil to get this high temperature heat. So these can be replaced with electric alternatives and the electricity provided by clean renewable energy. Now, the other thing, the game changers that are already occurring are offshore winds that is floating and floating solar. Because there are places, if you look at around the world, there are some places that are very dense. Take Singapore, for example, or even Gibraltar. Places where the population is so high in a small area that you can't put a lot of wind turbines on shore, and even near shore enough. So you want things like floating offshore wind. And floating offshore wind really opens up pretty much the whole world to wind power. And so it exists. There are now existing commercial offshore wind farms that are floating that not only have been built but are being commercialized around the world. And solar as well. There are now lots of floating offshore solar farms. And this allows places that are land constrained, say Japan, for example, to really build their energy offshore. So it's not even, in the case of the wind, you don't even have to see it. It'll be far enough away that people won't even complain about the visual because you can't even see it. So this is just really game changers in my mind, and really the thing that needs to be worked on even more, because the wind resources offshore are just incredible. It's the greatest unexploited resource of energy in the world is just offshore wind, especially the east coast of the U.S. offshore, and also the west coast, although it's deeper. West coast is deeper. That's why you can't have too many offshore turbines right now, because you have to go right now they're mostly going into the ground, under the water. So there are not that many places that you can put offshore wind along the west coast compared with the east coast. I mean, one good place is like off Cape Mendocino, but there's just been a lot of regulatory issues to try to get things in. There's no practical reason it couldn't be put in faster. Okay, so anyway, let's move on to talk about storage, because we'll need storage for 100% clean renewable energy systems, because the wind doesn't always blow, the sun doesn't always shine. We need electricity storage, heat and cold storage, and other types of storage, such as for hydrogen. So for electricity, we use concentrated solar power, and that's associated with storage for the most part. And there's pumped hydroelectric power, where you have two reservoirs, one upper reservoir and a lower reservoir. When you have excess electricity, you pump water up a hill. When you need the electricity, you let it drain down the hill and run through a turbine. And then existing hydroelectric dams are basically big batteries that you can turn on and off to some degree. When you turn them on, you can turn them on like within seconds and generate electricity. And then batteries themselves. So these are the main types of battery storage for electricity. There are others, but these are going to be the main ones. And heating and cooling, water. You can store hot and cold in water. I'll show you some examples in a minute. And in ice, you can store cold in ice. You can store heat in rocks, underground, and soil. And there's also in cement or other materials you can store heat in. And then hydrogen itself is really a form of storage of energy. And we'll use hydrogen pretty much only for transportation. For like the examples I showed you with the planes and the long-distance ships and long-distance trucks and trains. Because short distance, it's much more efficient to use a battery electric vehicle than a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle. And you use 1/3 the energy with the battery electric vehicle. A hydrogen fuel cell vehicle is more efficient than a gasoline or diesel vehicle, but it's much less efficient than an electric vehicle. So you only use the hydrogen really for long distance, because that's where the batteries become more difficult, because you need so many more batteries that they start weighing down whatever you're moving, and that's why, and then so they become less efficient if you have to have a long distance truck without stopping or refuel or recharging to go across country. Now, there are long-distance trucks, medium-distance trucks that have been built and commercialized now that are just battery electric, so those are great. Like Tesla has one, and there's other companies have built them as well. So let me just show you a few examples of some of these storage options that have been around for a long time. Stanford has had, since between 1998 and 2015, had a big ice cube under a building, and was used for this purpose. It's not this particular ice cube, but it's similar. We have coils in the ice, and so at nighttime when electricity price is low, you use the electricity to produce ice. And then during the day, instead of running air conditioning in the afternoon, use electricity, you run water through the coils in the ice, and you then send the water, cold water, to the buildings to cool the buildings. So this is like a battery storage, because you avoid the use of batteries in the afternoon, in the summertime in particular. But it costs 1/10 of a battery per unit energy. So a battery's like $300 a kilowatt hour. This is between $30 and $40 a kilowatt hour. So that's ice storage. Now, there was a natural gas cogeneration plant right outside my office for many years at Stanford. It provided 80% of the heat and electricity for the campus. Fortunately, it was bulldozed 2 years ago and replaced with these two boilers and a chiller. And what these two boilers and chiller do, and an elaborate piping system, plus about 50 megawatts of storage that were purchased, that were installed, I think, down in Southern California that Stanford purchased. So this is a kind of the heating and cooling mode during the year. So that's January and that's December. And so you need the light blue is the cooling that you need, which peaks in the summer, and the red is the heating you need, which peaks in the winter. But you'll notice that during the year, the university needs both cold and hot at the same time for different things. But whenever you create heat, you release cold, and whenever you create cold, you release heat. So instead of wasting that excess cold or heat that's produced, they capture it now. That's the dark blue and the dark red, and send it to these water tanks, the two boilers, two hot water tanks, and one cold water tank. And that heat or cold is stored and then reshipped around the university, so that you pretty much don't create a lot of heat, you just move it around, and you don't create cold, you move it around. So that saves a lot of energy. So these boilers and the chillers, plus the 50 megawatts of solar, replaced 80% of the carbon dioxide emissions from the university. Well, they still get some electricity from the grid, but the grid is cleaning up as well, especially if SB 100 even goes. And so this is a great thing. Now there's no longer a big gas cogen plant right outside my window. Instead, they just put up a huge building to replace it. Okay, so this is another innovative technology that's been around for a while, rocks. So you see the rocks? No. They're buried under the grass. So you don't even see the storage technology because it's buried under a play field that kids play on. And so this is a town in Okotoks, Canada, 1 hour south of Calgary. There are 52 homes that were built in 2004 and 5, and on the garages they have these solar collectors put on the roofs. And these solar collectors, you can see, they have a glycol solution. So in the summer, when the days are very long, these collectors are heated up, the glycol solution gets heated up, gets piped to this building where the pipe passes by a water pipe to heat the water. The water gets heated, and then the water gets piped underground in a closed loop, so there's no water release. It's just goes through the system and exchanges its heat to the rocks, heats up the rocks to 80 degrees Celsius or more. The rocks this field had been excavated, filled with lining to insulate it, and then filled with rocks and the pipes, and filled in, and then so the heat is stored until winter time when snow is on the ground, and the whole system is run in reverse to provide 100% of the heating for 52 homes. And whereas a battery costs, again, $300 a kilowatt hour, this storage system costs less than $1 a kilowatt hour. So this is called also a form of district heating. Now, Denmark and many European countries have district heating everywhere, but not with rocks usually. Like Denmark has 60% of all the heat is provided by district heating, but they have centralized water heaters, like in the last slide I showed. And the water is just piped to different buildings and used for building heat, and they also have a separate pipe for domestic hot water. So this is just something that can be done on a large scale, just hasn't been done because nobody's thought to do it because we've had so many fossil fuels that can heat us for many years. So it's time to change. So before I get onto our big plans, I still want to show you some more things. So I built a new home that I moved into last year, and there's no gas on the property, it's all electric. And I just want to show you what I did, because it can be done and it's cheap. In fact, I'll show you first and I'll tell you why it's cheap. Okay, so everything's electric. So the water heater is an air source heat pump water heater. So instead of creating heat to heat the water, the heat pump extracts heat from the room that it's in. It's in a mechanical room. And there's vents, so the heat is extracted and heats the water, then the cold is spit out through the vent, so the room chills down a little bit, which in the summertime is great because then you can just open the door and then the cool will spread throughout the house and it's a source of additional air conditioning. But this uses 1/4 the energy, 1/4 the electricity of an electric resistance water heater, or 1/4 the energy of a gas water heater. And to do the exact same thing, it uses 1/4 the energy because it uses a heat pump. A heat pump does not create heat, it just moves heat. So for every 1 unit of electricity, you move 4 units of heat. With gas heater, 1 unit of gas produces 1 unit of heat. Same thing with electric resistance heater, 1 unit of electricity creates 1 unit of heat for a water heater. Heat pump moves 4 units of heat to the pump and expels 4 units of cold. Now, that's for the water heater. For the house heating and air conditioning, we have these other heat pumps, which look like this. They're called Ductless Mini-Split heat pump air conditioners and heaters. They're mini-split because there are several of these units throughout the house. Each one is basically a localized heater or cooler. In this case, the heat is extracted from the air outside the house, not from the room. Or when the air conditioner is running, the cold is extracted from the air outside the house and sent to here. It's ductless because instead of having big ducts where you have, let's say, a gas heater, the heat is just spread throughout the house through ducts where there's a lot of efficiency losses in the ducts. There are no ducts in this. It's just the heat is generated right in the heater and through heat exchanging, and there's a copper pipe that has coolant that's only transferred. And then for stove, instead of a gas stove, I have an electric induction cooktop stove, not an electric resistance stove. People don't like, most people don't like electric resistance stoves because they don't heat up, you can't control the heat very well and you can't heat it up fast enough. This boils water in 7 to 10 seconds, and then you can touch it and you won't even feel it. So so it's actually much better than a gas stove because there's no pollution indoors. When you're burning gas in your home, you're producing NOx and other chemicals that you're breathing in. And plus you're using gas, which comes from somewhere, and you have to drill 20,000 wells in the U.S. every year to get gas. And there are 1.7 million active oil and gas wells in the U.S., 2.3 million inactive ones, and 20,000 new ones every year. So this is why if you keep burning gas, you're going to have to keep drilling these holes everywhere. Take up 1 to 2% of the land area in the United States. Then for electricity, there's solar on the roof, enough to power the whole house 2 times over, it turns out. I designed it because I thought it would be just enough to meet all the demands, including electric cars. But it turns out everything is so efficient that I'm actually using 1/2 the electricity I thought I would use. And I'm able to sell back the electricity to Silicon Valley Clean Energy, who took over for PG&E's generation, and they will pay up to 25 cents a kilowatt hour for what you generate, whereas PG&E would only pay up to 2 cents a kilowatt hour for the excess over what you generate. I mean, if you generate more than you use during the year, at the end of the year, the true-up with PG&E was down to 2 cents a kilowatt hour. Silicon Valley Clean Energy, which is a community choice, they pay up to the actual rate that you would pay for the generation portion, which is 25 cents a kilowatt hour. So they'll pay up to a maximum of $5,000 a year for the electricity that you produce over what you use. And in addition to not having to pay any more electricity bill. So that's really why this thing is going to pay itself off really quickly. So their batteries, they're 4 Tesla batteries, but PG&E only allowed me to turn on 2. So everything I showed you is going to be with 2 batteries because they just came up with some esoteric rule that if you have more than 10 kilowatts of storage on your property, they have to use some other rule book where they have to be able to measure what's going in from the solar to the inverter, as well as what's going to the inverter from the battery. And they didn't have the ability or technology to measure the solar. And so, as a result, they said because they can't measure it above 10 kilowatts, you can only have less than 10 kilowatts. They don't care if it's less than 10 kilowatts. So I shut off 2 batteries. But anyway, it turns out it's not that bad. When these other batteries run out, then we'll just turn those off. Okay, so here there are 2 electric cars that get charged maybe once a week, or sometimes once every 2 weeks. The batteries, but so everything is electric in this house. So I wanted to show you 1 week of this was in the summer, so it's maybe it's not representative of the year, but it's actually representative of about 2/3 of the year. Okay, so the green is the photovoltaic PV supply of electricity during 7 days. The light blue, which occurs during the day mostly, is home electricity use for everything that I'm ever using from the solar directly, because the order of operation is when you have the solar is used first to run your home stuff. If there's extra solar, that's then used to fill the battery. If there's still extra, that goes back to the grid, and then they pay you for that electricity. Then the battery only turns on when the solar shuts off, or there's not enough solar. So every day, the battery only turns on basically at nighttime. Then the battery drains completely. And then until then at night, if I need more electricity that's in the battery, then the grid comes back and I use grid electricity for that. So the dark blue is from batteries, you can see is at night. And then the red is from the grid. And the only time I really use the red from the grid is when I'm charging the cars. And you can see the 20 kilowatts from the Model S, and the other one, the 10 kilowatts almost from the Roadster. And so there's not enough storage in those 2 batteries, and the discharge rate is not large enough to actually charge the cars. So you need it from the grid. Then down there's the battery. You can see it's charging, discharging, charging, discharging. It's going down to 50%. Well, that's because the other 2 batteries are counted, even though they're just sitting there as 50%. So 50% is the minimum. Okay, so it's charging every morning and then discharging at night, charging every morning. But the real key numbers are at the top. It produced 580 kilowatt hours during that week of solar. 384 kilowatt hours were exported back to the grid, 103 were imported from the grid, so there was a net export of 280 kilowatt hours out of 576 kilowatt hours. So that means I sent 50% of the electricity back to the grid. So even if charging the car, running everything in this house, and then they're paying for that extra electricity. Now I'm almost, in April I'll be done with the full year, but so far I'm just over the entire, almost 10 months. It's at about, I've sent about 40 to 50% of the electricity back to the grid over those 10 months. Okay, so next question is, can the world transition to 100% clean renewable energy using these technologies that we're talking about? And so we're going to look first at roadmaps we developed for each of 139 countries. So what we did is we started with, well, in this case 2012, electricity energy use for all purposes. So that's electricity, transportation, heating, cooling, industry, agriculture, forestry, fishing. And we projected that energy use to 2050, and accounting for population growth and reductions in energy use due to efficiency. Then in a business as usual case first. And so we expect by 2050 that 12.1 trillion watts over the 139 countries, which by the way represent 99% plus of all the emissions worldwide. These are the countries we have data for. We didn't have data for a bunch of small countries. So we expect that to go up to 20.6 terawatts. Now it turns out if you then electrify all energy sectors and provide that electricity with clean renewable energy, your power demand will go down to 11.8 terawatts if without any heat pumps. And I'll explain why in a sec. But if you use heat pumps, it'll go down to 8.6 terawatts, or 58%. Okay? So just by transitioning your energy, it's hardly even changing your habits, not doing anything except to transition your energy infrastructure, you can reduce power demand almost 60%. I mean, it's incredible. And so here's how that breaks down. 23% is due to the efficiency of electricity over combustion. I'll explain that in a sec. 12.6% is due to the fact that that's how much energy is used to mine, transport, and refine fossil fuels worldwide. So when you have wind turbines and solar panels, the energy comes right to the turbine or panel, so you no longer need to search for the energy. So you save 13% right there. 16% reduction of power demand if you use heat pumps for everything, for all heating, cooling, air conditioning, refrigeration, instead of trying to produce the heat if you move it around. And then 7% due to energy efficiency improvements beyond business as usual. So just more efficient lighting, more efficient appliances, biking more, things like that. Now the 23% due to electrification, that's due to the fact that primarily in the transportation sector, 80 to 86% of the electricity in a battery electric vehicle goes to move the car, and the rest is waste heat. In a gasoline car, only 17 to 20% of the energy in the gasoline goes to move the car, and the rest is waste heat. So by going to an electric car, you reduce your power demand by around 70 to 80%. And without changing your habits, you just use much less energy. So as a result, the cost of driving an electric car is 1/4 to 1/5 that of driving a gasoline car. It's like 80 cents a gallon equivalent for driving an electric car versus $3 to $4 per gallon equivalent for driving a gasoline car. So you get a lot of efficiency reduction. So the next question is, well, the example I'm going to show you, I'm going to use the 11.8 terawatts. So we did cases, eventually we did cases for several scenarios, but I'll show you some results for the 11.8 terawatt scenario. So this is how many devices you need to power the whole world for all purposes to get your 11.8 terawatts of total energy among all 139 countries. It would be 23.5% onshore wind, 14% offshore wind, 16% residential rooftop photovoltaics, 12% commercial government PV systems, 20% solar PV power plants, 10% CSP power plants, 1% geothermal, 4% hydro, and then less than 1% tidal wind. So you can see the numbers of new devices we need, like 1.6 million onshore wind turbines, almost 1 million offshore wind turbines, etc. Zero new hydroelectric plants, because these are all existing hydro. Anyway, so how much land would that take? So this shows a map, or kind of an infographic of the land areas. So PV on rooftops doesn't take up new land, so we don't count that as new land. There's no new hydro, or geothermal is trivial. So the only real new land we need are for utility scale photovoltaics and concentrated solar power, which takes 0.22% of the world's land area. And then onshore wind, which is almost all spacing in between wind turbines that can be used for multiple purposes, such as ranching, farmland, rangeland, open space. But that would be about 0.92% of the world's land. So even counting that, you're not taking that out of production because it's used, as I said, for multiple purposes, but even counting that, it's 1.15% of the world's land area. The rest is offshore. So just to put that in perspective, as I mentioned, 1 to 2% of the U.S. land is used just for oil and gas mining and drilling, and not even accounting for coal mining and pipelines and refineries and gas stations and things like that. So we're going to use less land actually under the system than with a fossil fuel system. Okay, so next question is, can you keep the grid stable with 100% clean renewable energy? So we just came out with a paper last week that examined this issue for all 139 countries. We ran 3 different storage scenarios. We'll call them cases A, B, and C. So case A, we had batteries, concentrated solar power with storage, heat and cold storage, no heat pumps, no added hydropower turbines to existing dams, pumped hydropower storage, and hydrogen for transportation. And in case B, it was the same, except we had no batteries in that case, no heat pumps also, but we added hydropower turbines to existing dams, no new dams, but just added turbines to existing dams to increase their peak discharge rate, and everything else is the same. And the third case was with batteries, storage, concentrated solar power with storage, but no heat and cold storage at all, because we're using heat pumps in this case, just run on electricity without heat storage. We have electricity storage for the heat pumps, but there's no need for heat storage or cold storage if everything's using a heat pump. And we have no added hydropower turbines, and then we have pumped hydropower storage and hydrogen transportation. Turns out that the mean cost of energy in all cases is almost the same. And the demand reduction, the first 2 cases were 42.5% before the heat pump reduction. The third case, we had 58% because we had heat pumps everywhere. So we actually used less energy in that case. So I'm going to just show you some results. This is for case A. We found stable solutions for all 20 world regions for all cases we did. For all 3 cases. This shows 1 month of results out of 5 years. We ran 5-year simulations for each region at a 30-second resolution. We obtained the winds and solar fields from a climate model that's producing them every 30 seconds. And the blue is energy demands plus changes in storage plus losses plus shedding of energy. The red is the energy supply. You can see in this case for North America, US and Canada anyway, the grid was stable for all 30 days every hour, in fact every 30 seconds for 5 years. And then I'll really quickly run through these other cases here. Central America was stable, Cuba, Haiti, Dominican Republic. So these are island countries, so Puerto Rico would fall into this as well, although we didn't have the data for Puerto Rico. Jamaica, we have South America, New Zealand, Australia, Southeast Asia, Philippines, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, China, Hong Kong, Mongolia, North Korea, Russia, Georgia, Nepal, India, Sri Lanka, Central Asia, Middle East, Europe, Iceland, Africa. So in all 20 world regions, we found stable grids for all times, for all storage cases. So here's the cost of energy again. Now, well, on the top, we're going to be showing the fossil fuel cost of energy in the electric power sector before you electrify. So just because that's where we have to compare, there's no overall cost of energy for the fossil fuel sector available because every sector is different. So if we want to look at the fossil fuel sector, we have to break it down. So if you look at the electric power sector, it's 9.8 cents a kilowatt hour in the fossil fuel for the business as usual electricity cost in 2050 with fossil fuels. But there's another 12.7 cents a kilowatt hour of health costs and 15.8 cents a kilowatt hour of climate costs. So a total of 38 cents a kilowatt hour is the social cost of energy for fossil fuels in 2050. Whereas if we just look at the electricity portion of the original electricity portion of the wind, water, solar scenario, it's 9.7 cents a kilowatt hour, so it's about the same. But we say in terms of the direct cost, but we have no health or climate costs. We eliminate those. So it's 1/4 the social cost, but it gets better because, well, then the last number is all energy sectors with wind, water, solar is 10.6, but there's nothing to compare in the fossil fuel thing. So we really, for comparing the fossil fuel, you have to look at the electricity sector. But the difference is, even though the energy cost is similar, the direct energy cost, you use 43 to 58% fewer kilowatt hours with wind, water, solar. So you're actually, the consumer's cost is 1/2 the wind, water, solar price per unit energy. So in other words, if it's 1/4 of the cost per unit energy for wind, water, solar, it's 1/8 the cost out of your pocket. I mean, this is an incredible result. It's because you have 1/2 the energy. You're using 1/2 the energy in the system, plus you eliminate all the health and climate costs, which are 3/4 of the fossil fuel cost to society. So there's no matter how you slice it, it's much cheaper to go to clean renewable energy immediately, everywhere. There's no doubt about it. There's no rationale for using fossil fuels in terms of any cost. So next time somebody says, oh, the costs are more expensive for renewables, well, wind and solar in the U.S. are the cheapest forms of electricity today, onshore wind and utility scale solar by far. The unsubsidized cost, according to Lazard 2017, it compares the cost of energy. The unsubsidized cost of wind is around, onshore wind is around 3 cents a kilowatt hour. And for utility scale solar is now around 4 to 5 cents a kilowatt hour. And gas is around, this is unsubsidized before the subsidy kicks in. Gas is around 6 cents a kilowatt hour for new gas. Nuclear power is around 15 cents a kilowatt hour. Middle value, and coal is much more expensive. So wind and solar are the cheapest, even with storage. Wind and solar with batteries, there's a power purchase agreements in Colorado. There were 72 bids, the mean cost for solar plus batteries and wind plus batteries with the subsidy, which is about 1.5 cents a kilowatt hour, was around 3 cents a kilowatt hour for wind or solar with batteries. You have to add on 1.5 cents a kilowatt hour to get the unsubsidized cost. Which means that with storage, renewable energy is the cheapest form of energy there is. So, let me just speed up here. This shows, well, what happens if we transition to clean renewable energy. From 1750 to 2100, the red dots are the CO2 measurements in the atmosphere. From data, and the line underneath that is a model prediction up to 2015. And after that are different scenarios for different emission scenarios. The green line is if you eliminated all emissions in 2015, so that won't happen. But if that does happen, if it did happen, then you would get down to 330 parts per million of CO2 by 2100. The blue is 80% by 2030 and 100% by 2050. That's what we proposed. That will get you to 350 parts per million by 2100. The black is 80% by 2050 and 100% by 2100. And the rest are IPCC scenarios that are going to cause lots more warming, way more than 2 degrees warming. So the point is, we really need to transition rapidly, and this is what we're proposing. Let me just say something about public opinion about clean renewable energy. There was a recent opinion poll, 26,000 people in 13 countries, that found 82% of the world wants 100% clean renewable energy. That was pretty uniform. Unfortunately, only 66% believe climate change is a global challenge in the same poll. So a lot more people actually believed in clean renewable energy than believed in climate change. It's pretty sad, but the reason people believe more renewable energy is they say renewables make countries more energy independent. Renewables will boost economic growth. So even people who didn't believe in climate change, they still believe that there's benefits of going to renewable energy. There was a similar poll in the US for individual states that found almost exactly the same results. Nationwide, 64% strongly supported the contention that the US should go to 100% clean renewable energy. 19% somewhat supported it, so between the two of that, that's 83% either strongly or somewhat supported 100% clean renewable energy. Only 16% were against it. It varied by these states. There has been some laws proposed in the federal Congress, in the House and the Senate. House Resolution 540, Senate Resolution 632, Senate Bill 987, and House Bill 3314. They're all pending. They won't pass anytime soon, but they're all calling for the United States to transition to 100% clean renewable energy by 2050. And we've been working with individual states to help this transition. We did get in New York the Clean Energy Standard, or 50% law by 2030 for the electric power sector. California, we're hoping to get SB 100 passed, but if not, we already have the 50% by 2030 law. SB 100 be 100% electricity by 2045, 60% by 2026, but we really need all energy sectors. We can't just do electricity alone. Massachusetts does have a proposed law to go to all energy sectors, 100% clean renewable energy by 2050, it'll be voted on this year. And Hawaii does have an electricity bill that's passed already, 100% electricity by 2045. In the meantime, we have 56 cities committed to 100% clean renewable energy, and I don't think all these all on here. So they're not all on here for missing their city. So anyway, this is great news because Atlanta, Georgia, and Portland, Oregon, Madison, Wisconsin are very big cities, along with small ones like Silva, Boone, North Carolina. In fact, we have 12 counties and cities in North Carolina alone that have committed to 100% clean renewable energy beyond this. And then there are over 123 companies that have committed to clean renewable energy, 100%, including the major companies of the world. And so this is terrific. They've committed to having all their operations operate with 100% clean renewable energy. And to really spark this, there are 70 plus nonprofits, including Climate Reality, that are supporting this goal to go to 100% clean renewable energy. And so without all this grassroots work and building a coalition among a lot of people, this would never happen. This will only happen if people want it to happen, and we really need a lot of people to help. So just to summarize, I didn't talk about jobs, but our plans for 139 countries would create 24 million net jobs minus loss, require only 0.22% of the land for footprint, 0.92% for spacing, avoid millions of air pollution deaths per year, slow then reverse global warming. We think the grids can stay stable with 100%, and the energy cost, wind, water, solar, is less than fossil fuels, but we require half the kilowatt hours, but we reduce consumer costs directly by half. But the wind, water, solar energy plus health plus climate costs per kilowatt hour are 1/4 of those of fossil fuels. And then finally, transitioning to 100% in all sectors, we think is technically and economically possible. The main barriers are social and political, not technical or economic. The solution does require collective willpower and immediate deployment. And then finally, if you want more information, here are some websites. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have time for a few questions. I'm going to start with one. Mark, of the elements of the renewable plan that you've identified, what aspect do you think is the most vulnerable or most difficult to employ?
Be the technical?
Yeah.
Well, transmission, because since we're going to have a lot more build out of wind and solar, especially in remote locations, like in the U.S., the biggest wind resources are the Great Plains and offshore the East Coast. Transmission it's not a technical obstacle or even an economic obstacle, but it's to get them permitted. That's the obstacle here. I mean, other countries like China, they have no problem, they just put them on. But that's an issue. And Otherwise, it's really getting people to agree. I think that's the biggest obstacle. Well, I think part of it is education. I mean, a big part is education. Most people are not aware of what's possible. I mean, most people are not aware of what the technologies are. Like a lot of people, if you want to change your own home, I mean, most people don't even know where to start. And I think educating the public about what's possible is a big barrier. It's something that can't be done. There are over 7 billion people in the world. How do you get information to so many people?
Right. Question here.
And what do you see as being the capital costs to make this transition in that time, and what are the sources for people?
Yeah, the question is, what are the capital costs for our system that we're proposing here? Well, worldwide, the capital costs were north of $100 trillion total. But keep in mind, the fossil fuel industry spends like $5 to $7 trillion a year. So we're talking about 15 years of normal expenditures anyway. It'll be gradually installed. I mean, hopefully 80% by 2030 and 100% by 2050. And when you look at the cost, you have to look at the capital cost, the fuel cost, which is zero in our case, but non-zero in the fossil fuel case, and the operation and maintenance costs, and then look at the interest rate and over the time. So when you look at all those factors together, that's where you get the 10.6 cents a kilowatt hour. It's not expensive from the cost of energy point of view, but you do need a lot of capital. And so where does it come from? That's a good question. So there is a certain amount that's being put in right now every year for fossil fuels. Individuals invest a lot. I mean, it really requires, there's a lot, the one drawback of this system is it's more upfront intensive because there's zero fuel cost over time. So once you do get it up, it's cheap afterwards. But yeah, getting the capital to actually put it up is a challenge. So I don't claim to have the answer to get the whole amount. Very good.
Okay. Mark, could you dig in a little deeper to your wind and solar is 43 to 58% more efficient in and of itself. I understand if you don't have mountaintop removal and if you don't haul coal all over in trains, there are a lot. But if you could dig a little bit further into that, that seems surprisingly large.
Yeah, well, the 23%. So the eliminating the energy from mining, transporting, refining fossil fuels was 12.6%. 7% was due to just energy efficiency improvements beyond what's assumed in the business as usual case. So that's just a little more aggressive efficiency. There's about 16% due to heat pumps, just due to the fact that they're not, each heat pump replacing one unit of heat pump, or one heat pump replacing one gas heater uses 1/4 the energy. So, but when you average over all energy types in all sectors, it's about 15% or 16% of total energy worldwide you'd save. Then a major portion was the 23% is the efficiency of electricity over combustion. So when you look at how people count energy, they look at the energy that's embodied in coal, in gasoline, or coal, oil, and natural gas. The actual raw energy that's embodied in it. But when you burn coal, only a certain portion of that energy in the coal goes to creating electricity. When you burn coal to produce electricity, only, let's say it's 33% in that case of the energy in the coal goes to burn to create electricity. The other 2/3 is either wasted as heat and sometimes is captured, but only when it's captured, only a small portion is captured. So you have this huge inefficiency. In the case of coal burning, you have 66% efficiency loss of energy loss due to just waste heat. But when you take a wind turbine to produce electricity, that electricity then is used in a car. 80 to 86% of the electricity that actually gets into the car goes to move the car. Now there is some additional waste due to car charging and transmission and distribution losses, but those are relatively minor. But you actually, the end product, you have a lot higher percent of your energy embodied in the original electricity you gather that's actually converted to electricity, whereas in the case of coal or oil, a very small fraction of the energy embodied in them is actually converted to electricity.
Mark, did you have a question?
Yeah. Question about the global capital cost aspects of that. So it's like where are the chunks? And if you have towers for half or a third, wind towers for half or a third of the cost because of heavy columns, or if you have batteries for a lot less, what does that do to the numbers?
Oh yeah, it helps. So you can basically go through the devices I listed. There's a table of devices, and you can look at the capital cost. So I had 1.2 5 million onshore wind turbines. And so the capital cost of those are on the order of $1 million a megawatt, went to maybe $1 million to $1.2 million a megawatt. And you could then look at the cost per watt of solar and multiply through. So, yeah, and well, keep in mind that number also is those the number of well, yeah. So anyway, that's how you would do it. You just go through those, and you could go through if you can reduce the number of devices by or reduce the cost per device. Yeah, your cost is going to go down proportionally for sure.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Could you please put up that summary slide again?
This one?
Thank you. Another question?
Yeah, so I'm wondering, sort of on the social side of things, you know, in the scenario where everyone said, okay, we're going to get on board and do this, what kind of changes people would be expected to make? And, you know, what sort of behavior would really be required from all people involved, and maybe even by industries too?
Well, so we try to make it as painless as possible. So, I mean, obviously, we want you to change your habits and use less energy by biking more and things like that. But we're expecting people won't do that very much, and so it's really changing your energy infrastructure. If you own a home, try to transition to all electric. Get rid of your gas. Cut it off at the property line. Actually, you know, when I built this house, I saved $7,000 just to not have the gas hookup fee. I mean, before just PG&E's gas hookup fee is between, depending on how big your system would be, somewhere between $3,000 and $10,000. And just to hook it up from the street line, just to turn it on from the street line, because they already have it at the street line. And I asked him, why is it so high? Well, he goes, well, every department has to take a cut. So, there's no rhyme or reason for it. But you say,
So you highlighted, you know, one of the solution pathways is getting governments to create policies that push this out, that we want 100% renewables. That's a key push for this. Does the Solutions Project see other solution pathways? I'm thinking about sectors like the corporate sector, which may have some real incentives to see some of this. Are there other solution pathways besides just government, or is that really where we're focused?
no, well, it's actually the Solutions Project itself focuses primarily on inner cities and getting people who might not normally be engaged or care about this issue, trying to inform them. So it's really trying to educate the public and through different, it's really an education program. And it's like the Solutions Project doesn't actually lobby like Sierra Club and NRDC, and they'll lobby for these things through government. And so we really think it's partly getting people information to people and trying to enable and provide help as much as possible. In fact, they provide small grants. The Solutions Project does small grants to different groups that have creative ideas and how to get 100% out to the world. And so, it's partly individuals, and individuals can do a lot on their own, and also partly what government can do, and corporations too.
Well, it just seems that corporations could make a real
Yeah, they are. This
pull
one.
on this.
Yeah, they are.
Buy-in.
There's 123 companies. I mean, they represent more than 60% of the wealth of all the companies in the world.
We have time for two more. Yes, sir.
Thank you. So could you say how closely does your scenario interrelate with, for example, Paul Hawkins' project, Drawdown, which is also very solutions-oriented? How closely do they interrelate?
Well, I think we have the same goals. I think it's a little bit different approach. I mean, I don't want to speak for them too much because I don't know all the details of their plans, but I think their plans are more general and give you a laundry list of ideas and things to do. But we're actually very specific. We go each state and say this is exactly what you could do to get down, and we it's one way. It's not the only way by any means. And I think they're looking at a lot of general things. So they're saying use more solar and do something more creative farming practices. It's very general suggestions, but not specific state plans or country plans or city plans. We've now done town plans for 53 towns and cities in North America. So specific plans, including for Palo Alto, maybe Menlo Park, whatever was coming up. So that's the main difference. Specific. We're sector by sector as well. We actually look at the energy in every single sector what we can do to replace it in every sector. So I think it's down to the nuts and bolts, whereas I think they're just very general, like covering also more things besides energy in our case.
And one more. There seems to be a lot of concern about the capital cost and financing of this transition. And are you familiar with the Rocky Mountain Institute?
Yeah, sure.
You might just mention that because if people want to dig in deeper, they have it's a huge source of information on that aspect.
Oh, well, yeah, I didn't know they had information on the capital cost, but that's great to know.
Let's give Mark a hand again.